Hi everyone, welcome to Retail 301. By way of introduction, my name is Kritika Ganesamurthy. I'm the Global Retail Partner Tech Lead at AWS. With me today, I have Heyman Jayaraman and Sriram Vaidyanathan from Neiman Marcus, and also have Daryl Beckford from Waitrose. Today, we're here to talk about how to utilize serverless microservices to build unified commerce experiences at scale. Let's get started. Born from retail, built for retailers. AWS brings this unique combination of agility like a startup and also the experience of an enterprise class retailer like Amazon.com. Combining these skills, we are able to deliver this massive growth to retailers, which is why a lot of large retailers run on AWS today. Not just that, AWS continuously invests in developing industry specific solutions that are market tested by Amazon and rolled out as services to our customers. As you can see, we have large retailers running on AWS today, be it from product category owners like Best Buy and Petco, major groceries like Sainsbury's, fashion and apparel retailers like Neiman Marcus and Lululemon, e-commerce players like Mercado Libre and Zalando, they all run on AWS today. There is a lot of numbers in this slide, but as you can tell, the key takeaway from this is digital commerce is more important than ever. As consumers, I think we all can attest to that. I mean, just in the last year, I can tell you how much I relied on e-commerce just for my day-to-day activities, and that continues to be so. So commerce strategy is becoming very important for retailers. So how do you go about with your digital modernization strategy? What are the steps and what do you need to do? So if you look at the slide, on the left, you have like 4 business outcomes, and on the right are like frameworks or execution steps for you to achieve your business outcomes. Let's just start from the beginning. So you have agility and cost effective. I mean, to start off, you want to be able to build a foundational platform to be able to drive your commerce growth. For that, you have to migrate and modernize, and AWS Cloud is the best place for you to build that foundation. Because what you want to do is you want to have a stable platform where your customers can come experience your brand and actually shop with you. So you need to build that foundation layer on a scalable, resilient platform like AWS. So once you get the foundation built, then you start thinking about, well, I have all my customers coming in. Well, I need to make sure that those visitors are getting converted to customers. That is, they're able to convert on my side. So what do I need to do to be able to help them with conversions? So we think about enhancing customer experiences. That could be creating like personalized recommendations, could be content recommendations, ability to create these immersive experiences on your platform to just help them shop better. So the next comes, okay, so you've actually built your foundation, you've actually increased conversions. You want to actually expand your customer base. You want to bring more customers. So how do you do that? So the way you do that is going through alternative channels. Like the alternative channels could be expanding your brand in marketplaces, expanding your brand in social, expanding your brand in mobile. So the different ways by which you want to expand your brand and bring in more customers. So now you have everything. You have the foundation. You have all the customers you want, but you want to make sure that they continue to come to your brand and transact with you. They become your loyal customers. So you want to be able to deliver on the brand promise. And to be able to do that, the ways we think about is how do you expand that experience, like from a fulfillment standpoint? I mean, as shoppers, we get frustrated when we go to a store or go to digital and then don't find what we are looking for. So from a customer standpoint, from a retailer standpoint, making sure that those fulfillment options, making sure you have the right forecasting, right inventory positions in store and in e-commerce. So that way the customers are not disappointed when they come to your site to transact. And not just that, it's not just the buying experience, but it's just the end-to-end. How does a post-purchase look like? What should you be thinking about to make sure that the entire experience for the customer is spot on and they keep coming back to you? So to expand on that, if you look at the digital commerce journey, given the 4 foundational business outcomes we just talked about, here are some of the steps in each of the process. I'm sure, you're all in different stages of this journey. and some may be more matured, where you're actually at achieving all your business outcomes and trying to figure out what the next differentiator is. But there could be some of you who are in the midst of all of these changes. AWS and retail competency partners are here to help you with your digital journey. With that, I'm going to transition to Sriram and Hemant from Neiman Marcus.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Sriram, Senior Director, Omni Engineering Initiatives with Neiman Marcus Group. I'm happy to be here to talk to you all about what the technology teams at Neiman Marcus did to enable our store selling associates with a brand new build out of a remote selling platform. Hope everyone's having a good Black Friday and a Cyber Monday. So without further ado, let me start off with giving a brief intro about Neiman Marcus Group. We're a 100-plus-year-old company which specializes in luxury retail. We're one of the largest luxury retailer out there that gives an integrated luxury experience to our customers. So I'll start off with talking about what we actually built as part of our new platform, and then going into the roadmap of the solution on what choice of technologies we picked to build this platform and how did we build this, some key guiding principles from an architecture standpoint, as well as where we are today and some key takeaways for this. So as our CEO says, luxury is just not a self-service model, right? So we have our stores, physical stores, we have our e-commerce channels, but we are also always constantly looking at ways to equip our associates with information and intelligence at their fingertips so that they are able to do remote selling to our customers with best-in-class service. So how did we go about doing it? What prompted, in terms of, what prompted the build out of this next gen platform? We wanted to first enable a singular experience for our associates, which will enable them to have everything that they needed to effectively serve their customers at their fingertips. And then to drive this, of course, to drive productivity, in terms of how quickly and efficiently they were able to serve them. Along with this came, the benefit of overall, delivering with speed, in terms of enabling business agility. And then, and as we see, this actually came very, very handy in terms of, how quickly we were able to move, especially during the pandemic, right? And of course, from a foundation standpoint, we had to build this in a super modern architecture that was able to scale very, very effectively. So let's get into kind of the roadmap. What were the kind of the foundational building blocks for us, right? First, we start with people. We had really, really talented people in the company, but one of the things that we had to actually start afresh was to ensure that we reset and the culture that we wanted to adopt as we built out this platform. It had to be a very, very performance-driven culture, driving more engagement and ownership to everybody in the team. And then process for the sake of process was also not used, right? We also wanted to have a very, very continuously learning process where we were not afraid to make a change and try and test it out and move forward, right? And if it didn't solve an outcome, or if it didn't actually move the needle for an outcome, we actually got back to the table and figured out what we wanted to change to actually move it in the positive direction, right? So, and then technology, of course, we leveraged best-in-class technologies services from AWS to ensure that we were building on a rock solid platform that intrinsically came with a lot of benefits, which we were able to adopt and build on top of it very, very nicely. And then now I'll hand it off to my colleague Hemant to talk a little bit about the journey itself here. Hemant, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Hemant Jayaraman. I'm Senior Director of Cloud Engineering at Neiman Marcus. Thank you, Sriram. What you talked about was very important in our delivering this great new tool for our sales associates. But the most important part of something like this is the foundation that you have to build in terms of core capabilities, and then you build on top of that. So it's a multi-year journey. We, like most retailers or most companies out there, started down a journey of traditional cloud migration with a lift and shift approach. And as we started migrating traditional apps as is, then we quickly pivoted towards a cloud native approach, right? And as we gain maturity in building cloud native apps, leveraging native cloud services so that we are not doing any of the undifferentiated heavy lifting, we focused on delivering faster, quicker, but with the same level of security and availability that our customers and the business expect, right? So then the third step in that journey is also migrating to a serverless first approach. With serverless first, it completely transformed our core foundation where we are rapidly building and deploying code and being able to leverage all that capability at the same time reducing our attack vectors, right? That is some of the huge benefits of going towards serverless first approach, and then having the developers and the product teams focus on building that application rather than focusing on infrastructure. The other thing, as a part of core foundation we built, again, this is a multi-year journey. There is no easy button for a lot of these, is we actually built a cloud center of excellence team. And this team was responsible for the complete DevSecOps practice across the organization. So they're responsible for setting up the guardrails, for the governance, architectural standards, security standards, so that we, different product teams have a certain baseline and still within those guardrails can operate really fast and give and execute scalable and standard performance tested architectures. And that's what this team was, a foundational element of leveraging their capabilities to help accelerate that transformation. The next thing we did as a part of the transformation is also to focus on the cultural aspect of it, right? With any transformation, there's people, process, technology, which Sriram talked about. The cultural part is the most difficult part. It is to enable these product team with an owner mindset where they come in with a you build it, you own it philosophy that helps them kind of not throw it over the fence, right? If you have the skin in the game, you're building better products, right? The idea of even process, right? Process should not be an end to itself. It should be a means to an end. Most large corporations and enterprises evolve to a state that the process takes over the actual the goal of what we are trying to do. And in some of these things, as a foundational aspect, what we did is we took at those process and we actually automated those process. So the assumption is, yes, let's have process where we need to have it, but where it impedes agility is we quickly automate those processes and remove a lot of the human element. The most important thing about a lot of this process automation is accountability. The product team and the core engineering team still has accountability what gets shipped to what's broken. So that completely transforms how we respond to new features, how we respond to tech debt, and that forces our product teams to have complete ownership and accountability and not have a lot of finger pointing exercises that you see in older enterprises. And this owner mindset was one of the core cultural transformation that we enabled as a part of this Connect application that we launched. With that, I transfer you back to Sriram to talk a little bit more on the architecture.
Okay. Now let's actually get into architecture, key principles as to what are some of the key things that we adopted from an architecture standpoint. One of the things we were really, really clear about when we started this was we had to build a platform that was very, very future-proof in terms of being able to adapt to changes easily and being able to be super extensible in terms of how we wanted to extend the platform. And then serverless first was obviously a very simple decision to make, but at the same time, we had to put a lot of transformation in terms of thinking and the culture before adopting it, because where we were just focused on with serverless first, we were just focused on writing what matters to the business, as opposed to actually worrying about the infrastructure and how it was going to be run in the cloud and all of that, right? So it was a very simple decision to make, but there was a lot of pre-work we had to do to actually get there. And then it was also from leveraging cloud native services standpoint, it was also a very straightforward decision. We had to stay focused on what we had to build for the business, as opposed to worrying about hey, what infrastructure I need to run now to support a streaming platform and all that. And then loose coupling is such a big key part of any modern architecture that we build, right? Because it brings with it so much benefits, so that we can easily and quickly make changes to an isolated part of the system without impacting the system overall, right? So that was a very, very key tenet that we actually followed as part of our guiding principles. And then, of course, we automated everything. Infrastructure as code, automation and security were very, very key in terms of everything we did. Being it encrypting data at rest and in transit and whatnot. And then at the end of it all, we wanted to make sure that from an operational simplicity standpoint, there was no overhead, right? Everything from a serverless standpoint or leveraging cloud native services, it all ended up being that we were not worried about managing the service behind it. So that was the big gain there overall. And then just going into an high level architecture flow, this is just a very small slice of some of the patterns that we leverage. Obviously, the users had multiple ways to access the application platform, right? Be it through a mobile device, be it through a tablet form factor, or be it through a desktop. And then when they perform actions on the application, it gets routed to capabilities that were served from via APIs, and then these capabilities were workloads that were running on either serverless compute for the most part. In very, very specific cases, it may actually use a container-based workload, but for the most part, it was completely serverless workloads that executed the capability, returned back to the user the response for the action. In addition to it, as you can see, there's a lot of event-driven event-driven architectural principles that were actually used as part of the core framework, because any component can actually emit business events, expose business events, as well as consume business events for and decide what to do with it, right? So essentially decoupling every single part of the application platform to be working off of events in terms of communication and integration with each other, so that like I said, it was super beneficial in terms of being able to change independent parts of the application. So some of the key details in terms of architecture itself, of course, we had a rock solid identity foundation. Some of these services that you're seeing in the slide here are some of the key AWS services that we leverage, but this is not all of it, right? Of course, we leverage so many different AWS services across the landscape, but some of the key ones are listed here. Identity foundation, of course, we leveraged a lot of Cognito. And then we use Amplify to bootstrap, the application itself, the platform itself, and then, like I said, everything is API driven, right? Core capabilities have been built as APIs, right? That can be composed in different components, and then the platform emitted, exposed business events and consumed business events that were appropriate, for an action to happen, and then. Because we were doing serverless a lot and had a robust, setup in terms of, deployments itself and automated pipelines, we were able to, leverage downtown deployment with a combination, because serverless by definition, it is stateless and we maintained idempotency, so it was pretty easy for us to do no downtown deployments. So where did we end up after doing all of this? So right now we are having a fully built out platform ecosystem that enables our business to be very, very agile. We are able to, where they're able to drive a lot of omni-channel strategies and innovative ideas, but the core of it is we were able to deliver business agility. We were also able to improve associate productivity by giving them a platform where they have the information and the intelligence needed to deal with the customers very effectively and efficiently, thereby allowing them to deepen their relationships with the customer. And then we have a super robust technology platform which can scale infinitely, which can extend easily without ripping any of the foundation apart. So all in all, it was a great state we were in. I'll leave you with some images here of our new platform, which is called Connect, and these are some of the images of the platform itself. So some of the key takeaways I wanted to leave you with was basically. Always focus on the customer, right? In this case, the customer was our internal store selling associates. So we listened to them, the problems they had, and worked very, very closely with the business and our product teams to execute on things that mattered the most for the associates and for the business. And then the cultural transformation went hand in hand, because it was not just enough to have a great vision and a great strategy at the top, but also the cultural transformation had to happen across these teams to ensure that we were, from the ground up, everybody was bought into the success of the initiative. And then, of course, the architecture and technology is very key and foundational if you were to actually rapidly build something and be able to just focus on building your application. The choices we had to make in terms of moving to serverless, in terms of using AWS as the backbone, moving to serverless, moving to cloud native services, those are very, very key decisions. And the whole thing of how we actually put together, from a loosely coupled architecture standpoint was extremely key as well. So again, the whole team lived this mantra of not being afraid to fail, right? Right from the business to the product teams to the technology teams, everybody lived and breathed this mantra, right? It doesn't matter if we failed, but let's not be afraid to try something new. Let's be bold, think big, start small, think big, but try and rinse and repeat, right? And that's how we were able to be super agile in the midst of a pandemic to roll this platform out and be successful with it. That was a big success story for us. I will hand it off now to John from Daryl from Waitrose to talk about what they did with AWS. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thanks very much, guys. I want to talk a bit now about what I call the snakes and ladders problem. But before I get into that, I just want to briefly introduce myself and John Lewis. So the John Lewis partnership is made up of two main brands in the UK. There is the John Lewis stores themselves. These are general merchandise or department stores. Similar concepts you'll find worldwide. As a group, we turn over about $14 billion, so probably a bit smaller than some of the stores you'll find elsewhere. I think Macy's, as an example, turns over about 24 million. But it's generally quite a high-end department store. But some of the interesting things are that it's one of Britain's best-known brands. People in the UK don't really think Christmas has started until the John Lewis advert has been on the TV. And we make some of the goods ourselves. So we have a big business in made-to-measure furnishings and curtains for homes. The Waitrose brand is quite similar. It makes up a relatively small amount of the UK grocery market. We're about 5% of the total UK grocery turnover, made up from about 300 stores in the UK. We have a home delivery business. But the other interesting thing about Waitrose is that we also have our own farm where some of the food is produced. So perhaps if you're shopping for milk or fruit and veg, you might find that comes from our own Leckford farm. So to come back to the problem, the snakes and ladders problem, or I think as it's known in the US, Chutes and Ladders, this is a popular children's game where the objective is to make it to square 100. And as you move up the board, you might be lucky enough to land on a ladder, which moves you further up. But more often than not, you seem to land on the snakes that send you skittling back down to the bottom. And as an enterprise architect, I often think that this is a similar situation to how I find myself when I'm planning target architectures. The target architecture is the promised land, this great state we tell our stakeholders we're going to reach, but we never seem to get there. It always seems to be that just when we're well on our way, we find another snake and we come skittling back down to the bottom. So I want to talk a bit about some of the snakes and some of the ladders and some recent projects we've run in Waitrose, in the grocery business, that perhaps bring this to life a little bit more. So the first thing would be to talk about what is that square 100 for Waitrose. And I wanted to bring to life what perhaps an omni-channel experience for a grocery retailer may be. So it could start with a customer at home, perhaps shopping on the app, looking for inspiration. We have a very big section of our website devoted to recipes, which is very popular. So perhaps customers are shopping recipes at home and they're adding to shopping lists on their iPad. They may visit a store, and when they're shopping in the store, they could self-scan rather than going to a checkout. So they would use one of our quick check devices, which I'm going to talk more about in a minute. And perhaps as they're looking for those items in the store, we'll be helping them path find around the store. So where is the item they're looking for? Direct them to the next item. Getting recommendations while they're in there, and alternative products that perhaps if the first item they want isn't available could be another thing that they may do, and perhaps they do that on their mobile device rather than quick check. And then also we'd like to offer an endless aisle to customers in stores. So we do have a small range of department store items in our Waitrose stores, but quite often perhaps if the glasses or the plates or the cushions that you're looking for aren't available, you might want to order them with a partner there and then. So the idea of being able to do a partner assisted sale in store is quite important to us. Perhaps you want to pay for your items whilst you're in the store or on your phone. And perhaps those items that you've ordered in store are going to get delivered to you afterwards. And then after all of these things are done, you're sitting at home trying to decide what to buy next. And we'll offer you a shop from previous experience where you can go onto the website, see what you've previously ordered in the store and order those same things again for delivery. So I think these ambitions are relatively common across all types of retail and across the world. And these are the things that we're always trying to work towards in our Square 100, but it always feels like we don't get there. Now, we do have some ladders, and some of the key things recently for us that's been important have been agile development, where we have product-focused teams trying to rapidly iterate and rapidly release technology. And we've certainly moved from having tens of releases a year to thousands has made a big difference to the speed that we can move up the board. Very specifically for the John Lewis partnership at the moment is something called the Partnership Plan. This is a very large amount of investment being put into the business to create a digital selling environment. It's considered that the time is right for a reinvention. And so, this is something that's been well publicised in the UK about the investment that we're making in the brand. So this means that there's funding available for the kinds of projects we want to do to move up the board. And being able to buy off-the-shelf technology is quite useful as well. Excuse me. So being able to buy things that are readily available that we can integrate, drop into a composable architecture. something else that's good for us. But for all of those good points, there seems to be plenty of bad as well. So I think these messages will be common. There is the constant competition from other retailers, and the fact that there's always a new thing that we want to do or a new proposition we want to release that last month wasn't in the roadmap. And that tends to put back other things that we're working towards. Stakeholders always having a different viewpoint, and changing stakeholders as well as new people coming to the business can be a challenge, because again, their strategic objectives are slightly different from what we previously had. Ever-changing customer demands, again, something that causes us problems. We think that customers are looking for one sort of experience in their mobile device, and the world seems to move on. So we always feel like we're playing catch up there. And then environmental factors, and you don't need to talk too much about the pandemic and what that's done to the split between in-store and online selling. But trying to keep up with those things always seems to be resetting the dial for us. And something that's very physical, that perhaps our stakeholders don't recognise as much, is the impact that hardware refresh plays on this as well. So when equipment is getting out of support or needs to be refreshed, that tends to provide some sort of impetus for a new start that leads to people deciding that actually that thing that we've been working towards isn't quite our destination anyway, and we want to start again from the beginning. So I want to bring this to life a little bit and talk about QuickCheck. So QuickCheck is where you can scan your own shopping in stores. And at the moment, this is done through some handsets that we provide to customers. You can see these on the screen now. You register when you walk into the store, take the handset and scan as you go around. Now, the handsets that you can see is what we call QuickCheck 5. QuickCheck 5 started its rollout in 2016. And we actually finished the last store a few months ago. So that the rollout has taken quite a long time. And we're now at the point that the stakeholders are starting to talk about QuickCheck 6. They want to start again. Now, when QuickCheck 5 was first imagined, we talked about all the different use cases it could enable. We could have shopping lists built in so that if you'd shopped at home, you'd see those shopping lists on the device. And the device could path find and help you find alternatives and recipe whilst you were shopping. But we spent so much time with the hardware refresh itself, we've never really got round to doing those additional things. And now we're talking about taking it out again. So for me, this brings to life this snakes and ladders story, the idea that we only just got halfway up the board and all of a sudden the hardware refresh is sending us straight back to the starting point. Now, another interesting thing to call out here is the journey that we've been on with AWS for our e-commerce website. So this is where you're trying to order your shopping online for delivery at home. And we have re-platformed this from a pretty typical and common monolith product that we used to run the site on, where we had, as a database, a set of back-end services, and then a web front end, where releases were very slow, and it was very difficult for us to configure that off-the-shelf package to fit everything that we wanted. So we've been on a journey for the last few years to migrate away from that piece of software onto a set of services that we've built ourselves on AWS. We've got a couple of apps that run on top of that, and a React single-page application that runs the main website, all calling a set of microservices that we've built on AWS. Some of those have been built serverless, some of those Kubernetes. There's a mix of technologies in use depending on use case, but we've built these things in a product mindset, very clearly defined boundaries with the intent of being reusable. And I think that's the thing here that provides us with a brand new snake that perhaps we didn't have before. Some of the background tech that needs to sit behind the services that we're offering to customers already exists. We don't need to re-platform it. It's on the cloud and not going to get stuck in that hardware refresh cycle. So this gives us a big jump up the board. So that's the biggest snake off, perhaps. The hardware refresh doesn't exist anymore. We're not going to get stuck into that too much. Some of the other snakes that we often fall behind, perhaps scalability, are less important as well, because this is something that's almost out of the box in the cloud. And those reusable components are going to give us some extra ladders to help us with new propositions. So when we come back to that case study of QuickCheck, it's really interesting to think what we're doing now. So QuickCheck 6, the new version, is going to be a mobile-only application. We're not going to provide handsets in store. But we're not starting again from scratch. We're going to reuse all of the microservices that we've built for our e-commerce website. They're already there. They allow us to call down from a product catalog, to put a basket together, to price that basket, to apply offers, and things like lists and recipes, and offers available for customers are all there too. We do need to build some new services as well, so we're going to augment a bit on the side. There are some new things that we need, but we only need to build a small amount. We don't need to start again from scratch. And so this for me is a really interesting example of how migrating services to the cloud with Amazon is giving us an opportunity to move up the board a lot quicker. And I think this time with QuickCheck, we will get to that finishing square that we were targeting. So that's all the content we had here. I think now to hand back to Krithika for questions and answers.
Daryl, thank you for the presentation on your QuickCheck platform. I especially love the snakes and ladders analogy. I mean, let's all be honest, we are in an environment with changing priorities, changing expectations. So having the mindset while you're designing the foundational principles is excellent. Sriram, Hemant, thank you for presenting your Connect platform. And I love how you're reimagining customer experiences at the store and also making it easier for your associates. And also love the fact from an architecture standpoint, how you are going towards, or actually you are driven in a more serverless, microservices based, and also purpose-built data stores, and also with event-driven architectures throughout your application. And I also like the fact that this entire strategy is top-down. So on that front, I want to direct my first question to Hemant. So Hemant, you talked about how Neiman Marcus built the foundational platform. So what does the evolution look like now that you have the foundation built out?
Thank you, Krithika. At Neiman Marcus, when we started down this cloud journey, right, we started down with a top-down goal of a cloud first, right? And then we quickly evolved that into a cloud native and then serverless first. But that does not happen overnight. The most important piece of that is a core foundational platform that we need to have. Even though you're operating in the cloud, you need to have certain guardrails, right? You need to have certain best practices, some architectural standards. How do you do that without bottlenecking, but at the same time, you don't have a wild west where different teams are doing their own thing? So what we came about is a solid platform that we operate over, and different product teams can innovate at scale and can quickly deliver value to our business partners. But at the same time, the guardrails that we introduce are codified. So it's not just the fact that we have built something that we talk about it, but we actually codify whatever we have built and said, hey, these are the best practices, and how do we codify that in pipelines and other capabilities that we have, so that approach of building that solid foundation and security standards are enforced across all teams. And that's kind of the core platform that we built, that we operate on top of AWS.
Got it. So it's basically automation across all levels, application infrastructure all throughout. And yeah, and Sriram, Hemant talked about the foundational platform, and then you talked about just the Connect platform and how you actually sort of build that platform to go live amidst all the thing that was going on. So how did the foundation actually help you launch a platform like Connect so quickly?
Yeah, thanks, Krithika. So one of the key things, like Hemant mentioned, we had been actually building towards this cloud, moving and architecting for the cloud over a period of time. And one of the things that we took advantage of as we were actually getting mature in that journey was to really look at, when we started the Connect journey, was to really look at the three main things like I talked about, right? One of the things, like you said, even though it was a top-down from a cloud strategy standpoint, the way we were able to be successful with Connect was to ensure that the true cultural transformation happened from the ground up within the teams across technology, product, business. Everybody was bought into the idea that we rapidly try things and fail fast and learn from it, move forward, rinse and repeat, right? So that was the key thing, that the change that happened as we were actually starting Connect. And then, of course, without having a solid technology foundation and the way we architected Connect, right, that played a huge role. It is one thing to have the best tools, best platform in play, but if you still don't architect it the right way, you're still not going to get the benefits that you would have otherwise, right? So we had to really knuckle down, come up with a really, really excellent architecture from a scalability standpoint, as well as intrinsically very, very resilient, right? Because we were running on AWS, and then infinitely extensible, right? So that we were able to pivot strategies, move quickly. With the pandemic, we are always trying to stay one step ahead of, hey, what do we need to do for our customers or our internal customers, in this case, associates? What do we need to offer them, right? How do we pivot strategies? And these were all possible because we had a good platform, and top of it, we had a really, really solid architecture. And then to top it all, we had the culture to actually experiment and be bold and try things and move forward, right? So.
Yeah, that was a good point, Sriram. I think it's an important message for the audience as well, which is you build the foundation platform and then you help innovate. You do the rinse, repeat, you try experiments, you fail fast. So that way you can constantly be ahead of the game. I think that's a very important message. So I know you, both Sriram and Hemant, you talked about cultural transformation. So Daryl, I'm curious to learn about the cultural transformation that happened at Waitrose. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think the development of digital platforms is quite different from the way that tech has been developed in the past, all the way from the way that you engage with business stakeholders, plan a portfolio, and then deliver and support that technology. Although in truth, actually nothing has changed. So the language and a lot of the processes are different, but I think what sits beneath is the same. So we've been through that transition a couple of times, really, because as we migrated from that monolith platform into AWS, the digital teams went through that transition themselves. And so I suppose it's about making sure people understand that whilst they might not have requirements anymore, that they have user stories, that things are actually pretty similar in the way that they were. And what we're finding now is as we look to use this microservice platform across more of the organization, we now have to go through that same cultural transformation in different places. So it just becomes about helping people understand that whilst things look completely different, actually it's still the same.
Yeah, the fundamental principles remains the same. So Hemant, back to you. When you talked about the cultural transformation in your presentation, you also talked about this product owner mindset. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. The most important part about that transformation, when I say product owner, that it means we are almost operating like a startup within that product team, right? So you have complete accountability for architecture, engineering, and operations of that service that you're providing. So with that, most enterprises go with this. The development team builds something, tosses it over the wall to an operations team who have very little knowledge or very little impact on what's going on, and very soon it gets disconnected and customers are feeling that pain. So when I talk about owner mindset, that's what it is. It is that while we have an enterprise architecture team defining architecture, but at the same time, the product team is completely responsible end to end from cradle to grave in terms of engineering, architecture, and operations. That helps that true ownership, just like you would have at a startup. And then we can operate and deliver that high velocity that startups are able to provide in an enterprise, but still have all the guardrails, all the security checks that needed there to operate at enterprise scale. And those were some of the lessons learned and as a maturity of how we improved as a company and as a team that helped us get that owner mindset.
Got it. So Sriram, I know Hemant just talked about, setting those principles in place, but from an execution standpoint, being in front of the application development teams, how do you constantly make sure that, the principles, the foundation that is laid out is indeed being followed?
Yeah, great question. One of the key things that we do is there is leaders across all of our product teams as well as technology teams across the organization that are part of a core enterprise architecture group, and as part of the enterprise architecture committee, we discuss standards, in terms of what needs to be followed, what is actually better, without being too prescriptive, right? I mean, kind of exchanging ideas and making sure that we are able to then percolate that information across each of the the towers, right? So that there are guardrails, that we actually always care about, and that information then goes to the product team, right, as part of, because everybody, at least there is one representative, that is part of the enterprise architecture team, and then that information then, with once the product team knows the boundaries and knows the guardrails in which to operate, and then there is freedom, from the product team standpoint, in terms of choosing the right technology and the right solution to actually solve the problem, right? Which so that it is intrinsically the team that owns, like Hemant said, the product team owns the solutioning, from cradle to grave, be it from inception to delivery, everything is owned by the product team, right? So we do have a way to make sure that everyone is playing within the guardrails, but at the same time, there's a lot of freedom in terms of making sure that the teams can innovate and pick the right solution and the right technology to solve the problem.
Got it. I think it's a very true startup mindset, as you mentioned, and I can see that in how you not only set the standards, but how you're actually operating day to day as well. So Daryl, if you look at the conversations, it's all been around setting this, common framework and principles. What are some principles, architectural principles, that you've set forward at Waitrose?
So I think the principles are set at multiple levels, and so we have some strategic principles we look to set at the highest level. And the interesting thing about that is that sometimes they feel very conflicted. So a key principle for us is that services should be reused, and so therefore you have to think about reuse and build for reusability. But we also have another principle about keeping things simple and not building in capability that you're not actually going to need. We call it a YAGNI principle. You are not going to need it. And so those two feel like they're nicely in tension, that we're asking for teams to ensure that when they build something, they think about who else could be using that. But at the same time, they don't try and engineer for use cases in the future that perhaps aren't going to come up. And once you come down to the more detailed level, microservice principles are really key to us, especially staying clear in that domain-driven mindset that within the microservices there's a boundary. You need your services to be loosely coupled. I don't want business logic working its way into the pipes, whether that be some sort of translation layer or enterprise service bus. I want all that logic in the services. So when it comes down to the physical deployment, we look to stick with those microservice principles.
Got it. I love the YAGNI acronym. I think I'm going to borrow it and use it. It's wonderful. So Daryl, earlier you mentioned about how you've got the Quick Check platform, and then the other teams are actually on the similar path of reinventing customer experiences or building capabilities. Which means that there's constant learning that happens in the organization. So how do you enable this constant learning within the organization?
It's a really difficult thing because product teams are pushed hard. They're pushed hard to deliver, to get as much into the sprint as they can to keep the velocity high. And that doesn't necessarily always give them space for that learning. So I think the first thing is to keep working with product owners to ensure that there is space for engineers to learn and for architects to learn. We do all we can to share information around the partnership. So both brands run knowledge sharing sessions. So one of them is called TechBite, which happens every week in Waitrose, and that's a way of bringing some new content to the engineering and architecture community. And we do technical show and tells in John Lewis, again, very similar theme. So the idea is just to keep trying to put fresh ideas in front of people to try and make sure they're always learning something new.
Got it. Sriram, I would like to to get the question to you as well and see how you're enabling that in Neiman Marcus.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, the constant learning aspect. I mean, learning never stops, right? And especially, with teams that are trying to operate at speed and being able to deliver value to the business, everybody has to learn, right? From a be it a technology standpoint, be it from a process standpoint, be it from a product standpoint, what do we want to do, right? And that's where the concept of it's okay to fail, it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to actually, then go back, learn from it, do it right, and then make a new mistake, right? That's how we learn. That's how everybody learns, right? And in terms of what we do within the teams, I mean, team members have complete freedom in terms of what they want to pursue, right? If somebody is a UI developer and then he comes back and says, you know what, I could write Lambda functions, right? Because I know JavaScript, I know TypeScript, I could actually help write some server-side functions, right? So there is opportunity within the team where they could actually, figure out what story they want to work on, right? As part of a feature, right? Somebody says, I want to actually do something, try something new. I mean, that there's freedom, right? There's consensus within the team, and the associate goes and works on it, right? So, and it is very open in terms of, we do a lot of brown bag discussions. We do a lot of online conferences. We encourage people to always be on the lookout for for things that we can leverage and learn from. Be it myself or my boss or my peers or at any level, we are always looking for opportunities to better ourselves and what we can offer to the company that'll be beneficial, right? So learning never stops in my mind.
Got it. So I think I like the fact that you have an open culture of this entire workforce retraining, and also the flexibility for engineers to move around and just do what is exciting and what, so that way they are the best at what they do. So what's next? How's your IT organization evolving?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the evolution, I mean, we are on this path in terms of making sure that we carry this culture of continuous learning. We carry this culture of doing things, right? Doing things and then seeing how they perform, right? Being more outcome driven, right? In terms of whatever we work on, right? And not just do something because, hey, I want to play in Kinesis streams because that's a cool technology. No, that's not how we make decisions. We make decisions based on, hey, what is going to work for the product, for the business, for the company, and then at the same time we offer the freedom across the the workforce. For example, we have career paths within Neiman Marcus where people can choose to figure where they want to actually grow, right? So if you're an engineer, do you want to actually go into the architect space, or if you are actually in a UX designer, and want to transition to doing engineering, right? So that is also an opportunity there, right? So there is opportunity across the board for people to formulate, work with their leaders on what their career path needs to be and where they want to head, and the organization is fully supportive of that transition, right? So that is the key thing that we have enabled across the organization. And then if any of you liked in terms of the presentation what we did, as well as the journey that what Neiman Marcus has, we'll myself and Hemant are happy to talk to you guys if anybody wants to have more need more information on this and see what Neiman Marcus can offer in terms of opportunities, but if anybody's interested. So yeah, so all in all, it's been a very open learning environment across the organization that fosters constant learning and growth for the associate.
That's wonderful. So Daryl, back to you. There is John Lewis, and then there is Waitrose. So and you touched upon this a little bit earlier about the synergies between the organizations. So what do you see next? How do you see those organizations evolving from an engineering standpoint?
So from an engineering standpoint, the teams are already shared. So engineers are a member of what we call the tech profession, which means they could work in Waitrose or John Lewis. So whilst engineers tend to stay in one brand for quite a period of time, there's nothing to stop them moving across the brands if they wanted to. From a tech perspective, we're always looking for more synergies and more opportunity to share technology between the two. But what we don't want to do is to lose the individual brand identities. We also recognise as well that the customer journeys offered between a general merchandise and a grocery selling experience are often quite different. So we're always looking for opportunities we could bring those two things together, but without destroying what's unique. And I think the last thing when it comes to the engineering resource is that we're looking to put more and more design responsibility into engineering roles, because we recognise that the best architectures come from those self-organising teams. So we're still looking at how we can move more work from architecture into engineering, so that design work can be done where they can make the best choices.
Interesting. So I think you're making engineers the core focus of your platform, the evolution, and your product going forward in terms of how you deliver these experiences. Daryl, Sriram, and Hemant, thank you so much for sharing how you're actually building your experiences on AWS and your evolution within your company, your cultural transformation, and what is next for you and what is ongoing. Thank you very much for sharing. And thank you all for listening to this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.